Prime Minister. To all the states and nations, bond or free, to all the men in all the lands who care for freedom's cause, to all our allies and well-wishers in Europe, to our American friends and helpers drawing ever closer in their might across the ocean. This is the message. Lift up your hearts. All will come right. Out of the depths of sorrow and of sacrifice will be born again the glory of mankind.
Hitler is a monster of wickedness, insatiable in his lust for blood and plunder.
I think one of Churchill's greatest achievements was to realise very early on in the 1930s that actually Hitler's regime was a bigger threat to the peace and stability of Europe and indeed the world. And it's a leap that many of his fellows didn't make. And so he starts to sound the warnings. The problem that you have is that actually at that period he is out of office. He is on the political backbenches in this country. These are his wilderness years. That means, of course, when he starts to make his warnings about Hitler, there aren't people listening to him. And of course then, when war breaks out in September 1939, Churchill's warnings are seen to be increasingly prescient, increasingly true. His profile then rises. Chamberlain has no choice but to bring Churchill back into his war cabinet. By that point, there is a clear consensus in public and political opinion that he needs to be there and back in government.
I speak to you for the first time as Prime Minister in a solemn hour for the life of our country, of our empire, of our allies, and above all, of the cause of freedom.
Churchill's leadership in 1940 has an enormous impact. It's one of the things that none of the many Churchill detractors have really been able to take away from him. And that's that key moment in May, June 1940 when he takes over the premiership. And I think it meant it turns the Luftwaffe are now in a position to attack British shores directly. This is a disaster, and it falls on Churchill to articulate and lead the response to that disaster.
May well be that the final extinction of a baleful domination will pave the way to a broader solidarity of all the men in all the land than we could ever have planned if we had not marched together through the fire.
What he does is to make himself extremely visible and to put himself at the heart of the British war effort, and so that he is identified with that effort. This is very much leadership from the front, and leadership from the front in words and in actions.
He says to the commanding officer, what else have we got to put into the air? And he gets the reply, it's all in the air, sir.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much hope by so many to so few.
Churchill recognises very early on that Britain might be able to withstand German attack, but we can't ultimately defeat Nazi Germany and defeat the Axis powers without the involvement of the United States. And so one of his main policies is to court the United States and to court President Roosevelt. Churchill took incredible risks during the Second World War. It's really he that holds the Grand Alliance together. Roosevelt's disability makes it quite difficult for him to travel outside the United States. Stalin refuses to meet anywhere that can't be controlled by Russian troops. So to maintain this Grand Alliance, it's really Churchill that has to make a lot of the running. And he understands how vital that is to defeating the Nazi government and doing that in a coordinated way.
The Queen Mary has in fact one of the greatest of war records. U-boats tried and tried again to get her, but she was too fast for them.
The Queen Mary provided the perfect vehicle to take Churchill across the Atlantic. She was fast, which meant that the submarine risk was minimised, but even then there was still this risk.
And of course, Adolf Hitler ordered Dönitz, the head of the Kriegsmarine, to do everything that's necessary to do to sink at least one of the Queens. But of course, the ships were too fast.
The Queen Mary delivers him to the United States and to Canada for these top-level meetings. It's the vehicle in which the early plans for Operation Overlord and D-Day are going to have been discussed.
He knew that he always said was a purposeless victory, but that victory became something which in the end was inevitable once the real extraordinary material resource of the United States was brought to bear, and these million troops crossing on the Queens. Churchill once said that the two Queens had saved a year of war. They had reduced the duration of the war by 12 months.
I think the Queen Mary would have also given him a vital moment to relax. As wartime leader, he is under almost constant pressure. Actually, when he's at sea in those few days going across the United States, that's an opportunity that he can take to relax, to think, to actually have perhaps more in-depth discussions with his chiefs of staff, and also just to genuinely unwind. The Queen Mary had a particular place in Churchill's heart. The very name of the ship and what it represented resonated for him. And of course, he sees it in both wartime and peacetime. As someone who liked living well, was easily satisfied with the best, he really relished and enjoyed the top-level service on board the Queen Mary.
Being on board the Queen Mary always gave him a great thrill. Her superb lines, her grace, her beauty and speed. He was immensely proud of her.
The spirit of Churchill infuses almost every period in history, and a lot of American history as well. He'd actually learned his rhetorical style from an American congressman, Congressman Cochran. He actually said, "Cochran taught me how to make words sing."
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
But what I think is Churchill's real legacy goes back to the role that he plays in keeping Britain in the conflict. If Britain goes out of the war in 1940, there is no D-Day in 1944. It's a time when democracy could almost have been extinguished. Churchill helps to keep that flame alive.
You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory, however long and hard the road may be.
As John F. Kennedy said when he gave Winston the honorary American citizenship,
He mobilized the English language and set it to the battle. The incandescent quality of his words illuminated the courage of his countrymen.
and he really did. He gave the nation heart when there was little heart left.
Surely in this period of 10 months, this is the lesson. Never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. These are not dark days. These are great days. The greatest our country has ever lived. And we must all thank God that we have been allowed, each of us, according to our station, to play a part in making these days memorable in the history of our race.